4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. And now, Mr. Davis.
Hello there, welcome back. It's great to be with you again Wednesday evening 6:30, as I am every week at this time. I do want to alert you I won't be doing the show, the podcast, the next two Wednesdays because it's the Passover holiday. The first Wednesday is the night of the first Seder, the big party celebrating our release from slavery in Egypt. So it's a celebration in which we relive, we we produce the likeness. We reenact the likeness of the suffering we experienced in 200 years in slavery in Egypt. But it's a great party. In my family, we're up till 3 o'clock in the morning. The kids enjoy it. The kids are the stars of the evening, so they get a sense of their history and their grandfathers, great grandfathers, etc., etc. So that explains why I won't be on the next 2 weeks. In 3 weeks from tonight, I'll be back with you. Stay healthy. I love you all. You're my favorite people in the whole world. And also remember to read my book, 365 pages every single day. It gives you advice and contributes to your happiness. It's called Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. How to be happy no matter what. It's the best book on happiness ever written. Anyway, today we're going to discuss a subject that's going to be in the news for the next 2 years, I guess, right through the election in November 2024. So we're going to try to figure out who we think is going to be the nominees for the Democrats and the Republicans, and who are likely or unlikely other candidates that may run for president other than Trump and Biden, and also who we might think would be best for the country, and explore the major issues that would likely determine the outcome of this election. So I'm pleased to have my brilliant friend and colleague Ephraim what does it
Lowy.
come to me?
I think it's Lowy.
Ephraim Lowy, like the Lowy that competes with Home Depot. I don't know if he owns it, but he's one of the wealthiest guys I know in terms of knowledge and wisdom and the wealth he has through the wonderful children he has. That's more valuable than any money in the world. So, you want to kick it off and see?
Sure, we'll kick it off. How about I kick it off with a bit of a confession? My mild confession, if you will serve the role as rabbi or priest and absolve me of this. I know next to nothing about politics.
Really?
So
what are you doing here?
Exactly. I'm here to absorb. So I have a small understanding of political ideas, very little understanding, and maybe even a mild disdain for politicians. I kept my nose out of it for the most part. I will say I started engaging in political discussion around the time Trump began to rise to power, really as just I was mildly shocked that our community had rallied around him so strongly. And again, not to be pro or con, I just felt the need to point out to my children, hey, you can vote for this guy, but he doesn't stand for any values, any human values I stand for. And even if somehow our interests are aligned, right? If your interests happen to be aligned with a bad guy at any moment in time, and maybe you strike a deal with the devil, you still should be well aware of the devil you're striking a deal with. So that's kind of when I started talking about it a little with my kids. Of course, whenever we'd be at a Shabbos table and Trump would come up and I'd lose my mind, they'd start rolling their eyes and they'd make me promise, Dad, you're not going to talk about Trump again. Not going to talk about Trump again. But one quick thing I noticed, right? It tends to be a fruitless discussion when two people are on the opposite side of a political disagreement, right? It's just people flexing their egos or flexing their knowledge. I've rarely ever seen somebody change their mind around a discussion, which itself is the problem, right? So would love to hear your insights on the politicians, and maybe I can speak to some ideas. I have ideas about ideas or ideas about discourse. And I'll just give one quick example before I turn it back over to you, right?
I just want to make something clear. When you say our community, you're referring to the Orthodox Jewish community.
Correct. Yes. Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. The Orthodox Jewish community, for the most part, is pretty pro-Trump, and it's not that I don't understand any reason for that. It's just I don't understand the lack of caveats and the lack of restraint and the going along with almost like the color war element. Okay, he's our guy, and therefore we rally behind every single thing. The identity politics involved, right?
Well,
so
let me inform you or suggest why the Orthodox community is so enthused about Trump. As a matter of fact, if he ran for Prime Minister of Israel, he'd probably win in a landslide. He's very popular there. And the reason is, a number of years ago, I don't know if it's 25 years ago or longer, Congress voted to move the embassy, the American embassy in Israel, to Jerusalem. And that was a firm vote, and it was a directive to the State Department and to the American political leadership to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, because every country has a right to choose their capital and where the foreign embassies should be. And Israel was the only country that couldn't select its own. It was for most of the countries, almost all of the countries, I guess, it was based in Tel Aviv, contrary to Israel's wishes. And each time, as part of their platforms, both the Republicans and the Democrats said, when they get in, when I become president, I will move the embassy to Jerusalem. And each time during their tenure, they were asked, "What about it?" It's a commitment that was made. It was voted by Congress, and really overwhelmingly agreed to. And they always came back with, "Now is not the right time. It'll create conflict." So Trump was a hero in that he did something that all the others promised in a platform, but he actually moved the embassy to Jerusalem. There's very few countries that joined. There's maybe 2 or 3 other countries that have since done it. But
And I would agree unequivocally. So, unequivocally, Donald Trump was a great friend of Israel. And I would say anyone within the community, and one of these people, the person I speak to most about this would be my father. And if your sentiment is, I voted for Donald Trump because I'm a one issue voter and he's pro Israel, I have zero issues with that. As a matter of fact, I might even agree with that. I've never openly suggested, that there's no reason to vote for him. What I struggle to understand is not understanding everything else about him, right? So if you say, hey, Trump is a flawed character and he's actual threat to democracy because he was voted out but tried to get himself tried to institute a mild coup or resurrection, however you want to look at January 6th. Again, there's a wide range of ways of looking at it. Here's what I would ask you, right? Are you willing to give up democracy to have your guy in office? So if somebody said, I voted for Trump because he's pro-Israel, I totally understand that and I respect that. And again, I see the wisdom in voting that way.
yeah, but we're Americans. We should have a high priority for what he
And
does
even
in this country.
Well, and even if we don't, even if we only care about Israel, right? Ultimately, a weak America or America that loses its standing in the world is not good for Israel, right? So I can make 100 counterpoints to the point that he's pro-Israel, and they're all valid points. But what I felt the need, again, why I started engaging in the political discussion to my children is you just saw people blindly backing someone who on one issue we're aligned, but in terms of the core ethical values, he could not possibly be farther. Let me say it this way. If your daughter brought home Donald Trump, right, would you be, versus bringing home Barack Obama or Joe Biden? At least the other person is a mensch. You could disagree with his politics, but he's a human you wouldn't mind being in the same room as, okay? And ironically, I saw on the list of topics we're going to talk about is Buttigieg's sexuality. Are we ready? Right? The idea that someone would have a problem with.
Explain to the listeners.
Okay, so
who
Pete Buttigieg is Mayor Pete. He's an openly gay mayor who ran for the Democratic nomination in 2020 and presumably will run again in 2024. Now, the question that Mr. Davis is nice enough to share with me some of the topics before we get on, so I can make myself look a little more intelligent than I am by doing a little research. And the question is America ready to elect someone who's openly gay? In my head, right, we elected someone who weeks before the election talked about grabbing him by the pussy, right? And is a known philanderer. So the idea that we're okay with that.
Was backed enormously, overwhelmingly,
right,
by the Christian,
by every religious institution on the planet. But we would object to someone
the most dedicated.
Yeah, who but the thing is here, the idea that we would object to someone who was born with a specific sexual orientation. And let me give a little background on this. The reason as Orthodox Jews we have had the best run in America versus any country in the history of the world is because something we call separation of church and state. And if your political argument for anything comes back to a verse in the Torah or a verse in the Talmud, you need to let go of that immediately. Because however you interpret the Torah, if someone interpreting the Quran ever gets into office, right, they get to kill all the infidels, right? So we are here by the grace of God, but the mechanism through which it works in America is a separation of church and state. And the idea that we would someone who shares ethical values but was born with a specific sexual orientation that is not consistent with what our Torah says, that doesn't fit into separation of church and state. If your argument against Pete Buttigieg, if you have to quote the Torah, then it's not a political argument. That's a Torah argument, and he should not be the Rosh Hashiva in your school. And you shouldn't. You can talk to your kids, feel however you feel about any of that. But his ethics,
we should point out the guidance we get from our religious teachings, the Torah and the various scholars that help interpret it, is that whatever country we settle in and would disperse throughout the world, we have to abide by their laws. And we certainly don't have any agenda to kill any non-Jews.
Exactly.
Nobody ever crossed the street. Even Jesse Jackson some years ago said, "I never cross the street when I see a bunch of white guys on a corner getting together."
Exactly.
But he was implying that he's nervous if he sees a bunch of black guys.
Yeah, I would speak it out, right? If we could pass a law requiring all food in America be kosher, why? What does that do for us, right? Like we eat kosher,
Yeah.
we wouldn't want them to pass a law saying we can't keep kosher.
We don't impose.
Right?
We don't impose.
We're not looking to impose our religious values.
Our religious values
Politically. So political discussions should remain political. They should center around rights, around protections, around humanity.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's a long way of saying that I just try to highlight to my children that I don't think Donald Trump as a human or even politically, aside from Israel, is perfectly aligned with our values. And we can vote for him. By all means, go vote for him. But just know what happened on January 6th was no surprise to anyone who followed him, right? They asked him all the months leading up to the election, will this be a peaceful transfer of power? And he said, I'll think about it, right? Meaning if I win, it'll be a peaceful transfer of power to myself.
You have to admire his honesty, because when he was
agreed,
even when he ran in 2016, and he had a debate with Hillary Clinton, one of the interviewer asked him, "Would you accept the results of the vote?" And he said, "Of course I would, as long as I win."
Exactly.
What about the other way? He said,
yeah.
"Well, I have to think about,
And there's truth to that. Like on some ways, he's the most honest liar out there, right? There's some truth to that, and there's some value to that, right? Anyway, that's really where I got into the discussion and took a mild interest.
When you talk about his bias or his favoritism and his good behavior towards Israel, he also is not averse to creating anti-Semitism by making statements like in Charlotte, right at the beginning of his administration, he was at a rally and there were Nazis and a woman was actually killed there by these rioters. And at the end, he was saying, they asked him about the Nazis and so forth that were there. He said, well, there's good people on both sides. If there's good Nazis, that means the guys who were motivated to kill the Jews were good people.
And he recently met with Kanye and who is that Nazi? Some Nazi Kanye brought out. Look, what I love about
was it Jones?
I don't think it was Alex Jones. Kanye brought some other anti-Semitic guy. Anyway, what I would like to say, I'd like to pay you a compliment, because what I feel is missing from political discussion is the nuance, right? So you either love him or hate him, and here in this conversation, let's give him all the dues for being pro-Israel. Let's acknowledge it. And if you want to vote for that, right? But let's also be open and not just be blinded by, okay, he's pro-Israel, and therefore everything he says is gold and everything he does is gold. I mean, look, had Mike Pence not stepped up to the plate, right, democracy, the governing norm of democracy would have been challenged in 2016. And for all those of you who think the election was stolen, I will ask the question, I think I've asked it once on the podcast before, if the tables were exactly turned, meaning if the election was called in favor of Trump and Biden had whatever quote unquote evidence Trump had, meaning
no evidence.
Correct, not accepted by a single court. So if every single thing you're claiming stop the steal was reversed, right, and Trump had it, and Biden would Trump have said, hey, by all means, go ahead. You take the presidency, I'm out, because you have 2 WhatsApp videos of a guy with
They brought it to 60 courts, many of them led by judges who were appointed by Trump, and I think only one court took it seriously. Lewis said he'd look into it. None of the other 59 courts found any reason to not reject it immediately.
Correct. So, you always have to have your sacred principles, right? And had you been willing to give up your sacred principle of democracy so that your guy Trump could be office, just remember the next guy also doesn't have to abide by democracy, right? So it's always about a first principle, right? Like, okay, I get it. You want Trump to be president, but what would you want more, democracy or Trump to be president, right? And you always see people flip their values. I'll give you another example on the reverse, right? So liberals have always been super pro freedom of speech. But it happens to be over the last 10 years, the arbiters of freedom of speech are Twitter and Facebook, which are super liberal, who are much more likely to cancel somebody on the right. So suddenly, it's the conservatives fighting for freedom of speech, and the liberals are like, well, we don't really need freedom of speech. Like, as soon as the tool you used to fight for is now available to you, you can't let go of your principles. So that's why I always like to talk about the ideas versus the peoples.
Well, Fox News has freedom of speech, but they also have freedom of lies, as witnessed by the private conversations that were discovered and recorded, where they said they don't believe in Trump's claims that he won the election. They were actually very angry because they were the first ones. One of their hosts, one of the talking.
Tucker Carlson.
No, it wasn't Tucker Carlson. It was one other member of their.
Sean Hannity.
No, it was a less famous member of their team. Was the first to announce that Biden won the election, and they were fuming at him. Why did you do that? It's not true. Why did? They didn't want to be the leaders in saying that, and they were so critical of him.
Yeah, this is an excellent point. It cannot be stressed enough, right? So just to recap for those of you who have been living under a rock in the last 6 months, right? The primary media outlet that was pro-Trump was always Fox News. And a lot of their commentators, who are the most popular commentators in the country, promulgated and really disseminated this idea that the election was stolen. But it's been proven recently that in their personal text, they knew it was a total fabrication, right? So you have numbers, again, I don't know what the numbers are now, but there were times where 70% of the Republican Party was under the misconception that the election was stolen. And the basis for this was a media outlet that knew they were lying, right? If there is any criminal action that can be brought against these people, should be brought. And by the way, right, what did Trump always teach you? Don't trust the media. Don't trust the media. Well, don't trust the media, right, that's selling you Trump. So you can't have it both ways.
Other than Fox.
Right. Don't trust the media, but Fox is saying the truth. Again,
and also,
really hard to wrap your head around.
I don't know if you're familiar, you probably are, the minion that had the equipment, the voting equipment, the machines.
Right, they're the ones who are suing, right?
Yeah, was accused by the Fox and by the Republican Party that they rigged the election, and they're being sued because there's no evidence of that, and Fox continued to say that and malign the company, and they're being sued for $1.6 billion, and it's hard to see how they could lose because the very people that they're suing said there was none. They found nothing wrong with the equipment. There were not even one instance could they find where the machines corrupted the. So anyway, it's interesting. They asked one woman who's she voting for, and she says she's not voting. And they said, why not? She says, because it only encourages them. So she got it right. If we all stayed home and nobody voted, who would win? Each one of them would vote for himself, and it would be a tie.
No, because Melania probably would have voted for Biden.
Yeah, that's true.
So what are your thoughts on our President Joe Biden?
Well, I have to put it within a framework. was very good friends with Donald Trump. I actually loved him because when he introduced me to people, he said, Morty Davis, the greatest guy in the world, the number one guy in Wall Street. He endorsed my books, and you're in the hands of a master. And I mean, he couldn't be nicer. And I once spoke, I was chosen to introduce him at an event in Philadelphia at an organization that was founded by Ike Eisenhower. And they made Donald the honoree. And I was on the board of trustees of that organization, and they asked me to come down to Philadelphia to introduce him. And I got up there and I said the nicest things about him, and I believed it. I said he's a miracle worker. He developed the most amazing real estate
Brand.
most real estate buildings and hotels, and nobody could deal with Central Park's ice skating. It took years, and he got in there and fixed it up quickly. I said, and he's doing it throughout the world. I said, he's really a genius, and we have to appreciate him, and he's justifiably honored at that time. So, and also, he had a whole different set of values. He was a backer of Clinton, Bill Clinton. He was a backer of, he gave money to Hillary Clinton. He was pro-choice. He was a completely different person than he is.
Well, so it's not that, right? If you examine it, I'm not entirely sure his values changed. His self-interest changed, right?
Yeah, well,
so his value was always self-interest.
Not so different than it seems 90% of the politicians seem to be that way.
Fair
I don't
enough.
see any of them that are given their putting their re-election prospects at risk by passing gun control laws, even though 70% of the nation, and especially young people, are overwhelmingly in favor of stricter gun control laws. But so they don't follow what the people want, as you would think in a democracy they surely would, and they don't even follow policies that make sense. So you're right. He converted just 180 degrees. I mean, I never.
He was opportunistic, and
so I'm disappointed in him and in what he's shown as his values. So much so that his own sister and his own niece have written books and have been on television critical of him and saying that he'll never give up the presidency. And I tend to believe that. I think.
So you think he's going to run?
His hero. I know he's going to run, and he said he's going to run, and I have no reason to believe he won't.
And how do you see that playing out, just in the primaries?
Well, I never bet against him because he had 16 more qualified guys run against him in 2016. Most people thought he was doing it as a joke or as a thrill, that he had no intention even of serving as president. And he beat them all, and the odds-on favorite was Jeb Bush, who had name recognition. He was popular as governor of Florida. He had the biggest treasury already, campaign treasury. So everybody thought for sure he was a shoo-in. And then he had a lot of others that were prominent, more than we have now. There's almost nobody that's competing for the presidency on the Republican Party side other than DeSantis and maybe Haley and Pence. And those two are both under 5%. So they're very long shots. And I don't know if there's anybody else that is going to step up. Maybe, what's his name? Pompeo.
So in your opinion, if Trump Or
I would
Trump
never
will run
bet.
and win the
I would,
Republican
I would
primary.
never, and not only that, I would never bet against him because Hillary was an overwhelming favorite
Yeah.
and a shoo-in, and he had a much better campaign because his motto was "Making America Great Again." I had formerly written a book, "Making America Work Again."
Of making America work.
Uh, yeah, this was long before Trump ran. I don't know if he copied my book or the title or not, but it was a great campaign motto. And Hillary had one that nobody will ever remember. They didn't even remember it while she was running for office.
But the flip side is he lost.
Her motto was, or her crusade was, "Stronger Together," and that was hardly memorable, and it didn't say very much. So, and
Did it?
also, also he when he gets in a debate with Biden, who I expect at this juncture will be the Democratic nominee, uh, he could destroy her in the debate because he has no, he doesn't play by the, what do they call it, the boxing rules,
He doesn't play nicely in the sandbox.
no, it's called some aristocrat in England.
Got it. But the
The
flip side,
rules of, I forget what it's called.
the flip side is he lost to Biden, right? So he did beat Hillary, and he didn't just lose to Biden; he lost to the corpse of Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden is clearly not at his best. Reminds us all of the movie Weekend at Bernie's, basically, what's going on right now.
He lost by 7 million votes, too.
And for the most part, if you were to ask why, I think the people were just tired. They just wanted him to be quiet already, right? So I tend to agree with you. I could see him pulling out the Republican primary, but I have a hard time seeing. I have no idea who the Democratic nomination will be, but it's hard to imagine somebody less, right, uh, less beatable or than Biden. Biden, look, he's past his prime. He's lost a couple miles on his fastball, right? And it was really a referendum on Trump. It was yes or no to Trump. Would you rather have Trump or would you rather have an effigy of a Democratic
Biden
president?
also doesn't know how to maximize his his positives. He's doing some of it now, but to me, one of the greatest things he did, and he's always apologizing for it, and the Republicans are always beating him up for it. It was leaving Afghanistan. We lost 13 soldiers. That's mostly the responsibility of the military. But even if we lost them by his neglect or his lack of wisdom, it was the right thing to do because we're still in Iraq. After 22 years, we're still in every
Yeah.
country in the
And
world.
we're gonna leave that to your next book, No More Wars. That one's coming out.
End
soon.
all wars.
End
right.
all wars. But what are your thoughts on DeSantis?
I think Trump is going to destroy him.
Do you think he should? Would you vote for Trump over DeSantis?
I wouldn't vote for either one of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not impressed with DeSantis. I don't think he has great values. I don't think either one of them are running on policies.
Well,
Have you heard any policies that they're standing up for?
I'll say this again. Admittedly, I know very little about politics, right? But whenever you try and have the character debate about someone, people will say, "Well, I don't really care about his character. I want to know how good a president he'll be." So, if you want to know how good a governor DeSantis will be, he just carried Florida by 20%, which basically a break-even state, right? It's a swing state, and he carried it by 20% because that state is running the best in the country. Um, Biggest net migration long before COVID, but definitely during COVID. The free state of Florida. right, is open for business. Um, he's running. He's good at being governor. Does that portend well for his ability?
I can't argue with that.
Yeah. By the
He's
way,
a popular politician, but I didn't like that his issues are, you know, banning certain books
yeah.
in schools, some of which I don't like a lot of those books, but that's not what we should do. And also, while he took vaccination himself, he insisted that nobody else should. You know, freedom is a great thing, but it's like having the freedom to not be drafted, and that's a lot worse than taking a vaccination. And you don't have that right because we're in it together. We have to. If you don't get vaccinated, it's not only you; it's the people that you're exposing to this disease. So it's a kind of selfishness that's imparted, and he became a hero because of that. And the state didn't do any worse. I have to recognize that. But still, when we're in it together, we're all on the same lifeboat.
Yeah.
We I
Can
don't
I?
know if I told the joke on this program or not about the Titanic, the magician on the Titanic with his what's the talking bird, parrot, with the parrot, and this parrot always uh, gave away the secret of the magic act. So
We have a parrot
when the
over there.
when the Titanic went down, the magician was able to get a hold of a lifeboat and throw it overboard, and he and the parrot were on a lifeboat for 3 days. And most unusually, it never happened before. For 3 days, the parrot didn't say a thing. And then finally he said, "All right, I give up. What did you do with the ship?" So, um,
If I could share how I look at this, and again, admittedly, less about candidates and more about ideas. Um, I was thinking about the following example. I was trying to illustrate a point to someone the other day, and I said, imagine you have two brothers that are in business, right? And you can use cash accounting or accrual accounting. Okay, so one of the brothers who's in charge of the accounting does cash accounting. Now, as a result, it nets him a few extra dollars. The other brother walks in and says, "Oh my God, you use cash accounting instead of accrual accounting. I'm breaking up with you."
no, that's why they have two sets of books.
So the other brother decides to break up with him. This brother says, "You're going to break up with me. I'm going to break up with you."
Right.
They sue. They end up in court,
Right.
and they don't speak to each other for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Now, if I were to ask you to categorize their problem, would you say they have an accounting problem? Right? Or do they have an inability to deal with an issue? Right? Their problem is
No,
not that
no.
one guy uses cash.
No, in my book, they have a value problem. They don't express, you know, policies that they want to implement that will reflect, somebody said, don't tell me what your values are. Show me your budget and I'll tell you what your values are. Today it was announced that Trump and Pence both are going to an NRA convention. The day after
A shooting.
all these little kids, 9-year-olds, were killed, and three of their heroic teachers and a guard that they say, or I forgot what they call him, a caretaker who was beloved by all the teachers and the kids, were killed. And the next day they're endorsing the NRA, and the NRA, their case their case is the more guns, the safer we are because we need it. People need it for protection. If that was true, this country that has more people incarcerated than any country in the world. And despite that, with all those people incarcerated, we have more murders and more crime than anybody else. With all the guns that we have more guns than people. We have 325 million people in this country.
Mhm.
We have more than 325 million guns. More than one gun for every, and infants don't have guns, and young kids don't have guns, and even people that are disabled don't have guns. So it's more than one for every human being.
And that highlights this point perfectly, right? So,
And also there's 16 million Americans that have a gun that was prepared for war to kill as many people on the other side as fast as you can. So they have, we have 16 million people that have at least one assault weapon. Why would they ever need an assault weapon? For 10 years, we had a sunset. They passed a law for 10 years, from 95, I think, to 2005. Assault weapons were outlawed. We had far more less mass shootings, death by slaughter, the mass slaughters. And then it came time that the sunset wore out. In other words, it had to be revoted again to be continued. And the Republicans, I don't think they provided one vote. So these are values that are, to me, are important. And I'll tell you why I knew the Poles didn't know it. I don't know why they didn't know it. I knew it. The Republicans gave the election to the Democrats in 22. Why did they give how did they give and the Supreme Court appointees? Abortion. Because
which nobody wanted.
Not nobody. There's a lot of women that are pro-life.
No, sorry, I mean,
but an overwhelming number of women were really fuming and got out, and sometimes people feel they want to vote, but they're not driven to show up at the polls. So I knew that there's more women voters than men in this country, and also there are other things that inspired people. The gun issue. So it seemed to me they gave it to the. It isn't that the. I always say more people win because the other guy is so bad. It's not that they favor Biden or they love Biden. They were just so down on Republicans for instituting that. The Democrats should thank the Supreme Court for instituting that at that time.
Yeah, I think gun control, abortion, you highlight two issues where I believe there is a reasonable consensus amongst the vast majority of Americans how to treat both of those. It's just not aligned with the extremists that are funding political positions, right? So
it's even worse than that. They're not only denying women abortion, but they're saying they'll put the doctors in jail for providing abortions, and you can earn, even though you have no interest in the woman or the doctor that does it, if you report it, you can make $10,000.
Look, it's again going back to our
You can
separation
make a
of
lot
church
of
and
money
state.
following.
We can speak for days about the Torah's position on abortion, but I'll frame the question a little differently, right? Study the crime rates in cities 20 years after they legalized abortion, and they always go down, right? Meaning the last person you want in society is someone whose parents don't want him, right? Like, half the people that the parents do want him don't turn out okay. But the last person you want on your planet, right? So again, this is not a halachic psak. This is not a religious value. This is a societal political value, right? Do you want to deny someone who does not want their child? Do you want to force them to have that child? And then how does that contribute to society? And the data is striking. If you follow crime rates 20 years after abortion was legalized, it goes down precipitously. And so frame the question as, should we allow abortion? Okay, but it's the same people screaming about
I wasn't aware of this.
yeah. it's mind-boggling,
Really?
right? But so frame the question
Where-
about
where-
abortion.
Where did you find that?
I will get it to you.
Yeah.
But you frame the question about abortion, and suddenly everyone's piping up about their religious values. But reframe the question about welfare and about immigration, right? And about all the people that you don't want to be subsidizing, and suddenly you look at it a little differently. The fact is,
Remember, it was Bill Clinton that changed welfare.
yeah,
He said you had to have a job, and you could only have welfare for a limited time.
right.
So
Well, but here's my point. If and again,
the people that overwhelmingly get welfare should get welfare. There's people that rip it off, but that's always, you never forego the good for the perfect. There are people that need welfare, otherwise their kids would starve. We're a rich enough nation that we can spend some of our money to help those that are most vulnerable and most destitute. So they make a big deal of it because they show somebody got 10 checks or ripped off the government. That
Sure.
happens. But there's more people that rip off, more wealthy people that rip off the
absolutely.
IRS than rip off, and certainly for much greater sums of money.
Yeah, and all systems are going to have slippage, and it's the work of charlatans to substitute anecdotes for data, right? So you can always find one thing that went wrong in one piece of fraud in an election, but that's not data. But my point in all this, and again, without getting into any personal view I have, I genuinely believe that if you polled all Americans, right, and asked them for their thoughts on abortion, and you gave the following thing, you basically could get 85% to agree on the following thing: pro-abortion within a reasonable amount of time after finding out there's a pregnancy, right? So no one really wants third trimester abortions, right? And nobody wants, I shouldn't say nobody, the vast majority, with the exclusion of certain extreme religious views. And again, I'm not stating my religious view here. I'm just stating what the American public wants is someone to be able to get an abortion within a reasonable amount of time after they find out they're pregnant. And I'll bet you get 85% of people to agree on that.
I don't know if you noticed, but some of the states, I think Texas and Oklahoma and a couple of others, maybe Tennessee, have introduced laws that you can't even have an abortion if you're having if you're a victim of rape or what is it called, family incest, your brother, your
Right.
father, and also even where the doctor tells you, I took a picture of it and your kid has no head.
Right.
Do you want to bring that kid into this world? Or, you know,
and
they pass laws that you can't give people that are having what do you call it, a miscarriage. You can't help them to get rid of you get poisoned in your womb if you don't take the kid out. You know, so it shows you how extreme they become.
And more, right? So, and back to your NRA point, I think 85% of America is pro-gun control laws. Look at Australia. You know what happened in Australia? They got rid of all the guns, and there are no mass shootings, because you know what you need to do a mass shooting? This thing called a gun. Get rid of the guns,
I
right?
think I told you that.
Oh yeah.
In '95, they had a mass shooting in Australia. One mass shooting. They changed all the laws. They took everybody's gun away. Now you can only get a gun. It takes a year. You got to go through the police department. You got to show that you know, like you got a driver's license. You got to show that you know how to drive, and that you know how to be safe. You got to know how to shoot a gun, and you got to know how to put it away safely. So your kids, it's the number 1 cause of death, guns of kids under 12 or something.
Yes. So to explain, if 85% of America can agree on gun control and 85% of America can agree on abortion, why are no laws passed? Right. So what's broken about a system that is not giving us what 85% of the people
Because
want?
we're not a democracy.
We're a
the people,
51%
the
democracy.
people, it doesn't matter if we're 70%. In gun control, we're 70%. The NRA is focused on one thing. Most people are focused on a lot of things. They target any congressman that votes for gun control knows that they're going to go after him. Even Democrats know that they're going to go after me, and I'm going to lose. I'll be primaried out of my position. So nobody votes for it, even though they may favor it. They can't get any votes, and certainly not from any Republicans. So they'd be primaried out. So it's a country that's run by the donors. The donors call the shots, not not the people that voted, the masses that voted for you, but the guy that gave you the big contribution. He's the guy who got elected say, what do you want me to do? So that's not democracy. That's plutocracy.
We got 5 minutes
I
left.
just want to remind you of two things that you're probably not aware of. Some years ago, maybe 50 years ago, give or take 10 years, they brought up a law, I think it was in New York, I don't think it was national, that if a woman has 5 kids already, no husband, nobody working, she's out every night, leaving the kids alone, there's evidence that she's not a competent mother. They said, we'll give her $50,000 to tie her tubes, so she doesn't have any more children. 5 is enough, or something like that, right? There was such a rebellion. There was such a rebellion. We killed our producer. She couldn't take it. She couldn't take it. So, is she all right? So they said it's genocide, and it was such an upheaval, primarily by the African American community, because they felt it was targeted against them, so it was genocide. The other thing I want to tell you, in terms of Bibi Netanyahu and his recent law, Thomas Friedman is so, again, every article he's written in the last 2 months is beating up on Bibi Netanyahu. He's against the right wing, I guess he's against the Orthodox. Even today he has an article criticizing Bibi, even though Brett, the Republican writes for the Times, anyway, he used to write for the Wall Street Journal
Maybe
as well. Said, how well Israel democracy works, because the people, without killing anybody, without any shootings, just by marching and what do you call it, rallying, helped to overturn a law that they were against. And why they're against it, I think Bibi did a terrible job selling it, because all he's saying is, I want to do the same thing as the #1 democracy in the world does, where the elected officials appoint the Supreme Court justices rather than non-elected officials. Now there's 9 people on the committee that chooses the justices, 2 of which are elected officials, 2 are members of the Knesset, 2 are Supreme Court justices, so they can choose their own buddies or their own people with their own values, and then 2 are cabinet members. So it's not being chosen by elected officials, which is really the more correct way. In this country, the president chooses somebody, and the Senate has to confirm it. So it could be both parties, or if one party is overwhelmingly in power, then it's one party, but it's still elected officials choose. And I have to point out one other thing you're probably not aware of. It used to be not a sequence of who follows the president in case he dies or in case he's disabled. is it goes from the president, the vice president, the speaker of the House, the majority leader in the Senate, all elected officials. You know, when I was younger, how it went? It went from the vice president,
1 minute.
from the vice president to the secretary of state, to the secretary of the treasury, to cabinet members, all of which are not elected officials. So they changed it to elected officials. So Bibi's posture is not a wrong posture. They're saying, look, his motive is that he's been indicted and and that's why he's choosing it. Look, Trump is being indicted maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times even, and he's going to be running for president and has a decent chance to be elected.
And
And I don't know if we didn't talk about any other Democrats that would.
well, we can
Let's
certainly
go
get
on.
to that and to BB on a future episode. And I actually have to run, but I will leave you with a question, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear your thoughts even after I leave because I got to go. If you were president for one day, give me the 3 things you would enact.
If I was president for one day, I'd probably be impeached.
What would you go down? What would you go down doing?
I'd make sure that the children at school are protected. You know what they're proposing? You know what they're proposing? On the teachers. On the teachers. That's what we're turning. Anyway, my time is up. I got to wrap it up. So I want to wish you all a great week. Every day should be better than the day before. Good health, uplifting and fulfilling, and genuine happiness, and especially happiness. If you want to know how to be happy, the reports I'm getting back from people who bought the book or own the book or were given the book is it's the best thing that they've had in their life. It's every single day for the year. It gives you ideas of how to be happy. So be happy, don't worry, be happy, don't worry, and I'll see you in 2, 3 weeks. Have a happy Passover, happy Easter, and a happy every day of your life.